Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's guest is Devorah Heitner, and she's the author of 2 books, Screenwise and Growing Up in Public. And I think that you will really enjoy my conversation with her. We talked about really raising kids in this era of technology and how our choices affect them for good or not in terms of how we use screens with them and how we guide them using screens. We had a really interesting conversation about first cell phones and helping you with some big ideas around that. And we also talked about tracking kids. We talked about the classroom apps, and we just talked about sort of, screens are here to stay, and how can we model and teach healthy screen use. I think you'll find this a really practical and insightful episode. And I encourage you, if you learned something, if you liked what you heard, share it with a friend. This is how we can reach more people and help more people. So grab a screenshot, text it to somebody who you think might like it. And without any more talking on my part, let's hear my conversation with Devorah. Hey, Devorah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sarah.
I'm so excited to talk to you about all things screen today because that is something that comes up a lot in our communities and in parent coaching. So before we dive in, though, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. My name is Devorah Heitner, and I write and speak about this issue and get to talk to a lot of kids and parents. And I just wrote a book called Growing Up in Public. And before that, I had a book called Screenwise. And my goal is to demystify what kids are doing so parents can be less nervous and be better mentors to their kids.
Awesome. You sounds like you practice that very succinct. You probably just have said it a million times. So tell us just to give us a little bit of what's the big idea of Screenwise? Just that if people want to go and look at that, what are you writing about in Screenwise?
Yeah. So Screenwise is really about the received screen time and what kids are looking at, whether it's TV, internet, especially things like YouTube, and just what kids are doing and how we can think about screen life balance, how we can reduce conflict in our families around screens, that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah, and I want to talk about that some too. And then Growing Up in Public is your new book that's going to be out by the time this podcast comes out, so people can get that wherever they get their books. And why did you write Growing Up in Public?
Well, so many people, I've been speaking about Screenwise for 5 years, and I travel to so many different communities, and people are like, that's great, Devorah. I can see screens and tech in a more positive way now. I can understand better how my kid is experiencing this. But what do we do about their digital footprint? What do we do about the fact that every dumb thing my elementary, middle schooler, or high schooler does is going to be out there forever? How do I help them? I wouldn't want the things that I did in high school or college to be out there in the world in the same way that our kids are. And so a lot of parents are worried too that their kids are kind of selling their soul to the gram or, losing their way, losing their personality, focused on likes, focused on getting followers. And even for younger kids, just being super influenced by influencers, and feeling like fame is this tremendous goal. And yet we're not always thinking about the ways we are sharing about our kids and we're surveilling our kids and what role we're playing in raising kids that are so shared and compared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often say I'm so glad that there weren't phones when I was in high school. Oh my gosh. We're lucky that we didn't have all of that recorded to haunt us later. So one thing I really liked when I was reading your book, because it's always made me feel uneasy and I haven't been able to put my finger on why, but the whole idea of tracking kids. Can you just talk a little bit about, some of the reasons why you see parents do it and why you think it's not a good idea? Spoiler alert, I think I got from your book that you don't think it's a good idea.
Sure. So, one of the reasons I think we feel like we should track is just because we can, right? So, there's Life 360, there's, Find My iPhone, there's all these ways we can follow our kids around in the world like a little dot on the map. And because we can, there's some pressure like, oh, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should get my kid a watch so I can see their location at all times. But I think we need to ask ourselves some hard questions like, is this going to increase my anxiety or decrease it? And a lot of people are surprised. They think it's going to decrease their anxiety, but it actually causes more anxiety, more conflict. There's a lot of misunderstandings that can happen because the data is good, but it's not perfect. It doesn't really tell you why somebody is where they are, or if you're in a dense place, sometimes it can look like you're in one place, but you're in another. And it just might be better really to talk to our kids about how to be safe when they're out and about, whether it's a little kid walking to school or taking the school bus or taking even public transit or biking around, and what we can do to make the world safer for kids versus feeling like we have to track them all the time. And as they get older, navigating independently, including navigating getting lost or asking for directions or managing what will I do if my bus doesn't come or it's late. These are things we want our kids to be able to do. And if we're always tracking them, it can decrease the trust that we have with our older kids and make them feel like we don't trust them. And it can subtly undermine their progress toward independence, which really our job is as as parents to help our kids launch and be in the world. And if we're constantly tracking them, we can be getting in the way of that goal in a huge way.
Totally. I mean, I think there's this false sense of security that comes with tracking, right? That parents think that their kid will be more safe because they can look on their phone and see where they are and keep track of them. But as you said, it takes away the kid's own responsibility for, keeping them, knowing how to keep themselves safe out in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I taught my kids to ask. I mean, I don't know if a professional would agree with this, but I always said, if you get lost or, you need help, find a mom with kids is what I always told them, to go and ask somebody. And one day I got a phone call. We live on an island where you have to take a ferry to get to where we live, and a play date nanny put her on the wrong ferry, and she realized that she was going to the wrong place. I was going to meet her on the other side. And I, of course, didn't know that she wasn't on the right ferry. I was just waiting for her, but I got this phone call on my cell phone from a California number. And I was like, who's this? And I answered it, and it was her. And she's like, I'm on the wrong boat. I said, who are you? She said, I asked a mom with kids if I could use their phone to call you. So it was the only time she ever needed it, but it totally worked.
Absolutely. I mean, who's going to say no to a kid who needs to call their mom, right? Especially another mom. Like, of course, I would say yes to that. And I think anybody would.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good, or asking someone who's in charge, asking maybe not the driver, but another staff member at the ferry, asking the librarian at the library,
Right.
that kind of thing. Like, those are also pretty safe choices.
Yeah.
And I think we don't want to communicate, I think we don't want to communicate to our kids that the world is so perilous. I think we don't want to overdo the stranger danger. I think it's about how to find the appropriate stranger, and also how, you could disengage if someone was responding in a way that's unexpected and acting weird and getting too personal. You could retreat from that conversation. But in general, most people are good. And we don't want to teach our kids that everyone is bad, because then we're teaching our kids that no one will help you if you're in a scrape or in a bad situation. And I think that's overdoing it.
Totally.
Right? Like,
yeah.
The bad people, frankly, will usually approach you. It's not like you go ask someone for directions and suddenly a perfectly fine person turns into a monster because a 10-year-old just asked them for directions.
Yeah.
But like, most people are sitting there minding their own business or, doing whatever they need to do. And if a kid comes up to them, they're not going to like suddenly turn into the monster.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
so I think it's really important that we don't give kids an inflated sense of peril, that we do, talk to them about their boundaries and what are some ways someone, if someone's making you uncomfortable, or these are questions that nobody should be asking you, or, any red flags like that. But that's very different. And I think because our kids are so much more used to socializing online, they have less practice talking to people they don't know in person, whether it's meeting kids. Some kids are really good at like meeting other kids at the playground or the park, but some kids may need some help with that now because our kids are so much more used to meeting other kids, maybe in Roblox or having online play dates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking back to the example when my daughter was on the wrong ferry. Like, if she had been tracked, I guess I would have known that she'd gotten on the wrong ferry, but she would have had to, I don't know much about these things. Are there other ways that kids track? Because then I start thinking, well, then how early do you have to get your kid a phone if you are a parent who wants to track your kid? And then there's that whole, a can of worms too, right? Is like, do someone who's 8 really need a phone? And I,
A
I think
lot
the
of
answer is
parents are
no,
getting
but
their kids watches because they want to track them and they're not thinking about what a distraction it's going to be and what a challenge it can be. And teachers are telling me, parents are texting their elementary school students during the day that it's not necessarily the best for kids and their focus. So I think, sometimes we think we're doing something to keep our kids safe, but we're opening up a whole can of worms.
yeah.
So absolutely, if you're tracking, and also you would have robbed her the opportunity, if you'd been tracking her, of solving the problem herself and feeling the self-esteem and knowledge that she's sturdy enough and strong enough to deal with a situation like that, which could be scary. I mean, even as an adult, if I get on the wrong bus or the wrong train, it's pretty disconcerting feeling. And where am I going to end up? And how long is it going to take? And how will I get home?
Hmm.
But to feel like, oh, I did that, she's going to feel more brave about going out in the world because she knows even if something does get wrong and I miss my stop and I'm in the wrong place, I can fix it. It's
Right.
not
I
a
know what to do.
calamity.
Yeah.
And to
I know
have
what to
that as
do.
an 8-year-old, I think is very empowering.
Yeah, no, it was great. I'm sure I got a little judged by the other families who are like, say, yeah, just put her on the boat. It's fine. I'll meet her on the other side, but that's okay. I think there's a lot of growth that comes with, sometimes doing something that's maybe a little outside a kid's comfort zone, which makes me think of another thing about tracking is it robs kids of the sense of of freedom. I'm thinking of older kids, especially. Like I know one of my son's friends who's 18, still her parents still have a tracker on her phone. And I just think she doesn't have like a sense of like, I can be where I want to be and go where I want to go. And I think that's kind of too bad too.
I think if we're tracking our 18-year-olds, we're also sending them a message that it's okay to surveil people in a way that we might not want to send because we are, how would they feel if she had a romantic partner that was tracking her to
Right.
that degree? And we're kind of accustoming her to that. We're getting her used to the idea that someone knows where you are all the time. And to me, that's a bit big brother. And I know that's a bit generational. Like I'm a Gen Xer, I want my privacy. When kids willingly share with an app like Snapchat and all their friends share their locations, I think it can create negative feelings of feeling left out and other things. But kids do that and they say sometimes that it's okay with them. I wouldn't love it
Yeah, me
personally. I
either.
wouldn't want to know where all my friends are at every moment. And I would encourage kids to think about turning that feature off at least some of the time. But kids say they don't want to go dark and not be seen.
Interesting. Yeah, like there are some real generational differences, aren't there? And just having grown up with all of this technology and how, you and I might see someone knowing where we are all the time as creepy and kids might see that as just perfectly fine and normal. Since I brought up the topic of when kids should get a phone, like people are always asking me that. Like, how old should my kids be? Do you have anything based on your experience and research of when a good age is or why kids should get a phone?
A good time to get a phone is when they're meeting some other independence milestones and frankly when they're doing more on their own. Like if your kid was taking multiple ferries or buses, every day to get places and it wasn't just a one-time thing. I'm always wary of doing it for the one-time thing, like the one time the bus from soccer was late, because then you really are opening this can of worms. Are you ready to parent around a phone is another thing to ask yourself. So I maybe wouldn't do it at a big winter holiday, for example, when you're going to be really busy and not be ready to mentor and set your kid up. A time when you've planned it, maybe the beginning of a summer break or a few weeks before going back to school, especially maybe if they're starting a new school. A lot of parents will make the change at, junior high or middle school. Again, I'm not saying every middle schooler needs a phone. It depends on them and how mature they are. Also what grade that, in different places kids start at different ages. But I do think the more independent they are, the more they might be having care responsibilities for siblings. Home alone would be a reason. We went with it when we were ready to leave our son home alone because we don't have a home phone. So we felt like it was imperative that he have something when he's here by himself to be able to call us at least or call someone else in an emergency. And I would also remind parents that, I teach a whole class for people getting their kids a first phone, remind parents that you don't need to go from 0 to 100. You don't need to get them a phone that does everything, nor do they need it 24/7. You could go with a first phone and they could have a very limited number of contacts initially. And you could potentially get a device that only texts. You could make sure they don't have it overnight. And I would say maybe for the first few years, you could hold off on allowing them to access social media apps. I do think once they have the phone, it is a Pandora's box in some ways. Like it does open up a lot of things and they are going to start asking for more stuff. So I think we also have to be prepared for that. But I think if you can set expectations, okay, you're getting a phone, but you're just going to text. And the first few weeks, I want you to only text, let's come up with a list of like a core group of people. And then as I see that you're texting in a way that's working and you're using good texting etiquette, making good decisions, you can expand the list of people you're texting. And then for a whole 6 months or a year, maybe that kid is only going to use the phone to text and call. They're not going to maybe use a browser or use apps. I recognize that that's tricky, especially no browser. Like there are only a few phones that really don't have that. So I do understand that I'm setting parents up for more work. If you just hand a kid like a fully loaded
Well,
phone with
I
all the
think the
bells and
point is
whistles,
it's easier
more work.
to loosen your guidelines than it is to try and tighten them after you've realized that they have too much access.
And I would think of it and present it, to the kids as this is your training wheels and you're going to keep working on learning these things. So first we're going to learn about texting and texting etiquette and balancing phone and not phone. And we're going to practice making sure when we go to certain kinds of events that we put it away or don't bring it. And you're not going to have friends over, for example, and you're all going to look at your phones. And if you have a friend over without a phone, you're definitely not going to sit there on your phone, right? And then you're going to work on getting really good at texting. And then when you feel like you're good at that, we can talk about maybe you can add one app. But I would present it as a skill set and not even that you're being so restrictive, but you're allowing them the opportunity to get practiced and experienced in different modes of communication on phones. And you're keeping in mind their mental health. And we know that, social media comes with some challenges. And so does texting, frankly. And the group text in fifth or sixth or seventh grade can be a really toxic place sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't necessarily want our kids, diving into the deep end of that if they're not ready. And we want them to have some skills. So the other thing I would do before they get a phone is start working on some scenarios. Like, what will you do if someone from your team says, hey, maybe it's somebody from like hockey or dance, and they're like, let's start a group text. And then they start one and then they're like, let's start a new one without so-and-so. Like, how are you going to respond to that? Or what if they start talking in a mean way about a teacher? And really cross lines about the way they're talking about it, not just like, oh, that teacher's so difficult, but, start talking about their body or, there is something, that's really crosses the line that's not okay.
Yeah.
So we want to give kids some chances to practice thinking through how they might handle these very likely scenarios before they get a phone in their hands.
When you mentioned mentoring, is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So, I mean, my core philosophy in both of my books and in all of my work is that we want to be mentoring kids, not just monitoring. And we want to be teaching kids to do the right thing and make the hard decision, including maybe getting out of a bad group text or, doing something to intervene in a situation that isn't comfortable, or just, again, removing themselves versus feeling like that, they have to stay with it. Right. And mentoring over monitoring is so important because it can't be about catching our kids. We can't 24/7 monitor everything they do. And we don't want to get them used to that idea. That doesn't mean we can't look at some of the things they're doing, especially early on as a teaching tool, but I would never do it covertly.
Okay.
I wouldn't look at my kids' texts without their knowledge. I would actually say, let's sit down and look at a couple of these, maybe every couple of days if they're a new user, or once a week, and look at them together and talk about them and how's this going.
Yeah. So how do you draw that line? Because I know that there are some parents who do, go on their kids' phones and read all their text messages. And I personally, as a parent, my youngest is 16 now, so I've gone through this 3 times with kids getting phones. And personally, I erred on the side of privacy unless they gave me a reason not to, because I just felt like I don't want anyone reading my texts with my friends. And I always thought of it as like a conversation. Like, you wouldn't want to sit in the room with your 15-year-olds listening to their whole conversation, right? That would be a real invasion of privacy.
Yeah.
And I know some parents thought that was crazy, that, of course you're going to be checking and making sure that they're not doing anything bad. So how do you find that balance?
I think it's very important that we give kids, especially teenagers, some space to, develop their relationships, develop their points of view, present themselves maybe differently to their friends than they present to their parents. They're going to use different language and different ways of speaking with their friends, and that's okay. And we did that too. And the fact that they understand those different contexts is a positive. It doesn't mean they're sneaky. Just like a lot of the kids I spoke with had main accounts and spam accounts that they used to talk with their close friends. That doesn't mean they're using drugs or doing anything super problematic on their smaller account. They're just speaking in a more open way with their closer friends. And that's actually an astute understanding of privacy, that we should be happy our teens understand that the account where you speak to a couple hundred people is different than the account where you speak to 3 people. So I think we need to support kids' privacy, and we need to let kids know, if you're in a code red situation, that I believe you're in a life or death situation. If I believe, or you have shared with me that you're in danger of harm or self-harm, or you're in a violent relationship, or you are in a situation where you're abusing substances, or having an eating disorder or something along those lines, then I might look at your phone. If we can't talk, my first choice would always be that you would just come to me and talk to me. I will only, go snooping on your phone if I have no other way of finding out what's going on and I think you're in a life or death situation, then I might do it. But even if your friend is in a life or death situation, you can come to me and either show me the specifics without me seeing everything, or just even tell me it as a hypothetical. And maybe you don't even want to share with me who it is, but we can talk through, what are your options? What can you say to this friend? What can we do to help?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because a lot of times kids, when our kids' phone behavior changes, it might not be our own kid that's in crisis. They might be supporting a friend through a crisis. But it's very important, and kids really value their friends' privacy, and they'll feel really undermined in those relationships if we're reading not just their communication, but their friends' communication. And a bunch of teens made that point to me when I was researching growing up in public, that if my mom or dad is reading my phone, they're not just invading my privacy, but then my friends won't trust me as someone to talk to, because they'll feel like they're also sharing with, my dad or whatever. And
Right.
that's a real invasion, and that's going to hurt my relationships.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important that that adults recognize that kids' relationships are important. And if you read, you're going to be reliving, middle school or high school. And do you want to do that? Is
Sure.
that
Yeah,
good for your mental health? Or can you
you might
spend
learn some
that?
things that you wish you didn't know. Nothing like harmful
Yeah.
or
And can
anything,
you
but
spend
like,
that energy
yeah.
differently, like talking to your kid, getting to know your kid, making your house a safe space for them and their friends to be?
Yeah. One thing that I've seen over the years, as personally and professionally, is a real benefit for parents who practice peaceful parenting, which I'm not sure how much you know about it, but we don't do punishments. And so kids know, they grow up knowing that we might not be happy with something that you do, but you're not going to get punished, right? You're not going to be in trouble. And that means that a lot of kids in those situations are much more likely to come to their parents if they have, some issue that's happening with their friends or with them. I'm not meaning to give anyone a false sense of security that they never have to worry about their kids if they're peaceful parents, but it is a lot less likely that kids hide stuff like that when they know they're not going to get in trouble.
And I think, especially in the realm of tech, kids are very reluctant. Say they have broken a rule, like they've gotten on an app that you've asked them not to, or they've shared an image that you've been like, hey, don't send nudes, don't send underwear pictures. And then they did it. Or, and then if they're in a jam and someone's threatening them with exposure, or they're being either in a relationship that feels exploitative or problematic, they're less likely to come forward if they feel like the first response is, oh, I'm going to take away your phone, or you're
Right.
in trouble. Right. It's very, very important that kids can come to us, and that our concern for their well-being is the highest value, much more important than, oh, you did this thing that I don't like, or that I wish you hadn't done. And especially when kids have done something that they regret, they're already in pain about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they've blown up a relationship, or they're, in trouble with their friends, or people are making fun of them about something. They don't need us to add to that problem. They really need us to be their ally and be supportive and their mentor, and help them get to a safer spot.
Totally. I'm going to shift gears with it for us a little bit and ask you about two things that I get asked about a lot. And maybe you can shed some light on this. One is you talked a few minutes ago about having like times without your phone, maybe at home, we don't have our phones at these hours to have some like screen free time as a family kind of thing. But how do you balance that with so many kids have their social lives really more online now? And how do you tell your 12-year-old we're not going to have our phones 24/7, but they say, oh, I'm going to miss out, and this all this stuff, or maybe they're gaming, they have like their friends are playing a game together online. And I don't know, can you speak to that a little bit, how to find those balances of like healthy screen use with feeling like we're also like killing our kids' social lives if we do that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends if your kid is an introvert or an extrovert. I have a more introverted kid who's mostly doing like solo screen things, but does some connected screen things with other kids. So I'm like encouraging him, like sometimes remember your friends. But it really varies. Some kids are much more like they don't want to ever disappoint the friends by not showing up. And that's a pressure that I think we can help our kids reduce. I've had kids as young as 10 be like, oh, I feel like I have to be in Minecraft after school, even if I don't feel like it, because my friends will feel like I'm blowing them off or letting them down. So we want to help kids set those boundaries. And some of it can be blaming us. Some of it can be like, oh, my parents don't let me till I've done my homework, or I have to get off at 9 o'clock. I'm not allowed to stay on past bedtime or whatever. And that is helpful, especially for elementary and maybe early middle school, to be able to just use parents. And then as kids get older, to just be like, hey, I got to get my rest. I have a big swim meet. Be able to kind of put up some boundaries with friends, and to recognize that no one can be available 24/7, and that we have to have empathy for other people when they're not available. Even if we urgently want to hear from them, they might be, getting ready for that swim meet or sleeping or eating meals with their family. And that's okay, right? People don't need to be available 24/7.
Well, what if your kid wants to be available 24/7 though, and you've recognized that that's probably, you don't want them on their screen 24/7?
I think it's important to let them know too that they have to be available to be a member of your family, that they have to show up at dinner and, spend more than 10 minutes shoveling the food in and leaving. Like, everything can't be like what we do in between gaming or in between social media. And I think some kids do get to that point. And so maybe that family goes with like an unplugged day of the week or an unplugged half day of the week that really is family time. And because we don't want kids being like, okay, I'll go on this hike with you, but I'm going to go really fast so I can get on my phone. What we want is, to really have some time that they know is unplugged, that they can kind of manage in their brain, and to recognize too that if a teenager feels addicted to their phone, but they're using it for social purposes, that it is highly developmental. For a lot of teens are wired to be connected most of the time. And then if we could have, had our phones, in the room with us all the time, we would have. I snuck the phone into my bedroom at night sometimes so I could talk with my friends late at night after my parents went to bed. So I think that urge to do that is part of being a teenager to some degree. That doesn't mean we can't push back, that we can't expect our kids to also do their chores, their homework, spend time with family, have some unplugged time that's just downtime for reading and other pursuits. And that is where it gets tricky, because the phone can eat up all your free time. And we maybe don't want that for our kids. So I think even talking with them about the fact that these apps have no ending cues, that TikTok will just keep going forever, or that, a certain game online will just go forever, and recognize that at some point we need to intervene and pick other things to do, because our bodies and our minds need that change. We can't only sit at the computer or the phone.
And what this is all like bringing up in me is that we have to be mindful of this in ourselves, because I think a lot of us, we tend to, I know sometimes I just find myself on my phone and not paying attention to anyone else or anything. And I'm like, whoa, what just happened there? Right. And I think we want to remember that we have to practice what we preach with our kids.
100%.
Yeah. And that can be hard to remember. A slightly different thing that I always get asked about a lot too is when parents are mindful of not wanting their kids to spend too much time on screens, then they get the laptop at school, and, they get given a school laptop to bring home, and they're supposed to do work on the laptop, but then they come in and they're on YouTube, or maybe they even have to use YouTube for school, but then they end up on other videos. How do you navigate the school devices with wanting to have some screen time limits as a family?
Yeah, that's really tricky. And the school devices are very 24/7, although we're seeing some schools recognize that unless the kids are using it for something, they should maybe put it away. Maybe it shouldn't be out at lunch. Although I know at my son's middle school, the Chromebooks were out at lunch and recess, which, I don't know if that's so ideal in terms of kids learning to be social. On the other hand, there were ways that kids were using them socially. And, like you, I live in a cold place. It's not always that nice to go outside. I think the adults don't want to go outside. I think we should push the kids out the door, frankly. But,
Yeah.
Sometimes the adults don't want to go outside and supervise when it's miserable out. So, I think it's a tricky balance. But I do think schools having kids put away both school and personal devices at lunch and recess and passing periods is not a bad idea. And then making sure they're being used in the classroom intentionally, and that parents feel empowered at home to have kids put them away. Ideally, the school device isn't in the bedroom overnight, just like the phone isn't in the bedroom overnight. And if your kid says, I need to stay on my school device late at night because I didn't finish my work, especially if they're not in high school yet, I would just say send them to bed anyway, then the homework can wait. And if you didn't get it done, you'll work that out. In high school, I think sometimes as our kids get older, we also are getting older. And sometimes our bedtime is going earlier and theirs is going later. And that's really tricky because the adolescent brain is wired to stay up late. But we still ideally want to try to outlast our high schoolers most evenings so that we can know they're going to bed, because it's very easy for them to stay on that school device or personal device till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. And then in most places, that means they're probably not going to be able to get enough sleep unless they go to a very unusual secondary school that starts very late in the day. And that's not great, right? If
Yeah.
they're in college, maybe they can be on that schedule and take, mid-morning classes or afternoon classes, but high school doesn't work that way. And so it's important that we try really hard to make sure that they're still getting some rest.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear you say that schools are starting to recognize that it's a little bit problematic, the devices that kids are given, because it is tricky if you're trying to limit it, but then the kids are like, oh, but I have to be on my computer because I have to do this thing. And you often aren't able to change the parental controls on those school.
It's tough. I would
Yeah.
say, though, you can get from your kid's teacher, if it's an ongoing issue, the grade level expectations for homework. Because sometimes they'll tell you, oh, it's 30 minutes in your child's grade. And you're like, wait, why are they taking 90 to 120 minutes every night? In primary school, if the school is saying it's only 30, like
Right.
sometimes it's that the teacher doesn't know, but sometimes your kid is like spending a lot of time playing IXL math or something else that they don't really need to spend, or they found a back door to something else to do on there.
Right.
So it's good to ideally, sometimes we'll do parallel play in my house where I do my homework and my work and my husband does in a place where our son is also doing the work. And then it's like a soft kind of supervision. It's not like super spying, but we are kind of like, oh, how's that going?
Yeah. You might think
And it
twice
also
about
keeps me on task, frankly, because, I struggle to stay on task as well.
Totally. And I think if you're in the same room, it's a lot harder to just go on YouTube and start watching skateboarding videos if your parents are right there, right? It might give you a little bit more self-control to stay on task, as you just said. Speaking of school, another part of your book that I really liked was when you talked about the classroom apps, basically another form of tracking, right? It's just like the parents tracking the kids' school work and tests and all of that stuff. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, a lot of schools have places where you can sort of check all your kids' assignment grades and their quarterly and semester grades. And it's very stressful for a lot of families. And it's stressful for kids getting a grade and knowing it's going to be posted to their parents before they have a chance to really even absorb the information. For kids taking multiple classes a day, like junior high and high school, you can get a grade in one class while you're sitting in another class, which if you get it to your phone or your school device, that's very distracting to be sitting there and, getting that information at a time where you can't really process it. I don't even really believe in grades, so I'm really an outlier, but certainly I think that kind of extrinsic feedback, if it doesn't come with any qualitative data like a comment, is not that valuable anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then to get it at all times and to also, get zeros when things are missing, and those kind of will tank your average, and parents see that and freak out, but they don't know if their child has maybe worked something out with a teacher. Sometimes teachers don't enter the grades at the same time as other teachers. So one class will look like you have a lot of zeros because the teacher hasn't done the grading yet, and that can be very ambiguous. And then teachers tell me that they don't really like how often they hear from students and parents solely around the grade book the second they enter grades, and it makes it feel like a very transactional relationship with them. So
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone needs to just take a step back from these apps and ideally don't check them that often. Take them off your most commonly used device. And I say this to teenagers as well as parents. You should not be mashing the buttons and checking your grades every couple of days or every couple of hours. That's way too much.
Well, it feeds anxiety too, doesn't it?
Absolutely does. And you get in the habit of checking it just like we check Instagram.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So I
I
think
I
parents
think
really need to take it off their most frequently used device. And I have a whole checklist of ways you can reduce your reliance on grading apps that I can
good.
share, but I just think it's really important. And again, if your kid is struggling, there may be other things that are helpful that you can do, but checking their apps or those apps frequently is more likely to cause conflict between you and your child. If your child is walking in the door, ideally, maybe we don't pounce on them with questions at all, but certainly not like a why did you get this grade kind of question. Most kids coming in from school are exhausted. They want to chill. But they may not have even seen that grade yet. So the fact that you've had time during the day to check it is really kind of a problem. And how would you feel if you came home from work and your spouse had been checking, your performance and was like, hey, why were you late with your report that you were supposed to deliver at work? Like, wouldn't you be super stressed?
Yeah,
Like, whoa,
yeah.
whoa, like that's really invasive.
Well, also, it strikes me it's not their spouse's responsibility to keep track of your work. Just like, I think that, I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Ned Johnson and William Stixelred, The Self-Driven Child, but if you're the one who's checking your kid's grade every day, you're taking away that responsibility for them and their learning, right? Like
Oh yeah, Ned and I talk a lot, and he was kind enough to blurb growing up in public,
Oh,
and I'm a
good.
huge fan. So
Yeah, me
yeah, I
too.
think
He's been on the podcast
absolutely.
twice.
If we outsource all responsibility to parents, then how will our kids just like, if you outsource your responsibility for knowing where you are to your mom and you're tracking and your kid doesn't have to ever ask somebody for directions or to help them out, they're not learning how to get out of a situation. And then what will they do when they're an adult and their phone dies? Like,
Mm-hmm.
even if your phone is dead, you might still have to get out of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need a B plan, right? We can't be so over-reliant on technology that we can't function.
Yeah. And I think also that just the parents, checking those grades is really sending this message that it's not you that's in charge of your learning. Like, I'm the one who's going to be overseeing it and in charge of it, which doesn't let kids take responsibility for learning, even the grade thing aside, but parents being that
Absolutely.
in their
The
business.
behavior apps, I think, are also really tricky and not great. And I've talked to a lot of families, especially families of neurodiverse kids or kids who struggle more with self-regulation, where the grading apps like Classroom Dojo just make them feel terrible.
Yeah. Like, because those kids really are doing the best they can, and then they're getting penalized for it. Okay, well, there's so much great stuff in both of your books, and I will link to them in the show notes, and I encourage anyone to get a hold of them. And I hope you'll send me the link also for your getting a first cell phone for your kid course, because I know people ask me
Yeah,
about that a lot.
absolutely.
Yeah, and so we'll share that
Absolutely. And
as
I think
well.
I can share like a coupon even just for your listeners,
Oh,
because I
that'd be
do think a
great.
lot of people would love the support, and it's just really hard to do. And it's just helpful to even know what questions they should be asking and like how to get on the
Yeah,
same page as your co-parent so that you're all thinking about the same stuff. Because sometimes one parent's like more ready than the other, or is thinking about one set of issues, like, social stuff, but they're not thinking about some of the logistical, like where is it going to live in the house? So it's helpful to just
yeah.
have some checklists.
Oh, great. So yeah, we'll definitely share that, and the code would be amazing. So here's a question that I ask all of my guests, which is, if you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself? And it could be about anything. It doesn't have to be about technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it would be to try to get a handle on my own anxiety and try to just, I mean, not to criticize myself and beat myself up and feel anxious about my anxiety, but just to try to recognize that it's anxiety, that I come from a family with a lot of anxiety, and that, many times things will work out, and even the things that stay difficult, like the anxiety, isn't always contributing useful information to the situation. So just anything I can do, especially I found those early years very, very hard. And so, I think if I had been able to tap into more strategies that help my anxiety, that would have been an easier go.
Nice. Nice. It's always easy to see things when we're out of them more, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Well, tell our listeners the best place. I mean, we will, as I said, put those links in the show notes, but for anyone listening, where's the best place to go to find out more about you and what you do?
Sure. So DevorahHeitner.com, and then both Growing Up in Public and Screenwise are on all the places where you can get books. And I'm also DevorahHeitner.substack.com. So you
Okay.
can find me there. And I'm Devorah Heitner, Ph.D. on Instagram. So I can send you all these links. But I think my website is a really good place to find the books and links to my social and anything else you might want to do.
Perfect. And yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of great stuff that's really going to help families. And one thing I just took from your work is that screens aren't bad. It's not that tech is evil, and there's a lot of good stuff that comes out of tech too. And it's really just being sort of mindful and intentional and educating ourselves. So I think it's a really positive message.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that screens can bring us together. I think tech is an incredible tool. And so much of the time it is enhancing our lives. And we forget some of that because there is so much stress too. And if we can focus on the ways that it's enhancing our lives and try to really, take advantage of those things, and then also, try to diminish as much as possible the ways it's adding stress, or notice like, oh, I don't like this habit. This is what I want to work on. But this other way of spending time together, like even just like watching a show, like I'm watching all of Battlestar Galactica with my 14-year-old, and it's so fun. And we look forward to it every evening. And that's a real pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've watched a number of really great series with my daughter, and it's given us some really interesting things to talk about. Like Sex Education was I don't know if you've watched that with your son.
Yeah, that would be a hard watch, I think, for me and my kid. I think he would be mortified to watch that with me. I watched that series on my own, and I think I would be fine. I'd be happy for him to watch it, but I don't think that would be a shared watch personally.
Yeah, I
But
guess it
I
depends
think
on the
it's great
kid.
that you watched it together, because that's a really great opportunity to
Yeah,
talk.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Devorah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.